Welcome to the zombie apocalypse. Anyways, that's how I imagine they sound when they're chewing on people. All right, how we doing, folks? I'm running on a low battery today, but fear not. I have my good trusty friend, Coffee, and yeah, we're gonna get this puppy going. Um, last week at last week's zombie or apocalypse Humpday, I got cut off in the broadcast. We missed about 10 minutes of the story, and I ended up talking to myself on air. Well, I wasn't on air. I just ended up talking to myself. So that is nothing new because I've talked to myself plenty of times. Anyhow, I'm going to pick up where it cut off last week, so we can flow into that story. We are going into chapter 4 tonight of my book, Zechariah 14:12, Humanity's Last Stand. It is a book that I wrote back in 2012 regarding the zombie apocalypse. Here's my thing with the zombie apocalypse, okay? I've been obsessed with zombies since the original Dawn of the Dead came out. And since then, every time I walk into any building, anywhere, I think to myself, how would I fortify this place in case of a zombie apocalypse? Bad part is, I'm on the main level of a duplex. And yeah, I'm pretty much toast if something like that happens. At least when I run out of ammo, I'm toast. So, yeah, it was kind of just a weird obsession of mine. I was sitting out at this place called Pioneer Park, or I think it was Heritage Park or something like that in Fairmont, Minnesota. It's where they had the prairie dogs before they realized they had the plague. But anyway, um, I was sitting out there and I was looking around and I'm like, going, man, if there was a zombie apocalypse, which building would I run into? And then ideas started flying around in my head, and then next thing you know, I come out with this story. This story started out. It started out as a short story, and I published it in Midnight Snacks, I believe. And after people had read it, they said, "Oh, you should make a novel out of that story." And I'm like, "Well, how do you make a novel out of a zombie apocalypse? I mean, it's kind of the same old thing over and over again." But I toyed with the idea, and I started writing a little more, and I started writing events that led up to the short story that I had. And then it just kind of became the monster that it is today. It's still selling very well, actually. Um, but my book sales are actually doing really well as far as my latest book, Pavor Nocturnus. That one's selling like crazy, and I'm okay with that. Mostly on Kindle, not so much on paperback, but that's okay. I mean, my story's getting out there, and actually, your stories are getting out there because there was a select group of people that gave me prompts, which was basically the nightmares that they could remember from their childhood, and then I turned those into stories. Anyhow, yeah, so that book's doing well. So thank you guys that are out there buying my books. Sweet. Also, and I say this on every podcast that I do on here. I thank you guys just for interacting, liking stuff, sharing stuff, conversing with me, saying hello, even watching these videos for 3-4 seconds. I mean, it really helps the algorithm of Facebook, evidently. This is my third week running as top rising content creator. And I mean, like I said, I always say I have no idea what that means. Other than my stuff is going out to strangers now and being recommended by Facebook. So very cool. Related to the Tunes on Tuesdays that I do, I had done Waylon Jennings last week, and I put a reel of that night on Instagram, and I got a like from Waylon Jennings' official Instagram page. It's got the blue check mark. It's run by I'm sure it's run by somebody from his estate. So hello, Gerald. Yeah, maybe I should do that, where I just turn into a robot and, start killing my friends' families and stuff. How about that? So, anyhow, Gerald wrote, write one about scaring the crap out of your childhood friends. So, he and I grew up together. And, anyway, so yeah, that's pretty cool. Waylon Jennings' Instagram page liked my my little reel of me singing Waylon Jennings. So yeah, I'm really cool with that. Very cool with that. The giant steamroller. I forgot about that. Anyhow, yeah, so that was my hang up with zombies. Dawn of the Dead. It was all George A. Romero's fault. And I've watched every zombie flick since then. There's been some good ones and there's been some bad ones. And perhaps one of these nights we'll go through and we'll critique some zombie flicks. That might be fun. Yeah, I like that. So anyhow, let's get back to Apocalypse Humpday. It is night 6 of the zombie saga. We've actually been doing Apocalypse Humpday, I think, darn near 2 months now. So very cool. And let's jump in. Let's see where we left off in the book. Len Emerson and his mother-in-law and his kids were on their way to the National Guard Armory to see if his wife was there, because the hospital was overrun with zombies. And he's on his way there, and he reluctantly stops for a minivan that was on the side of the road, and there were dead heads all around it, shaking it, trying to get in to eat them. So he pulled up on them, and that's when the video stopped last week. So we'll pick up from there and then move on to chapter 4, where we will meet a very special character. So, all right, here we go. Chapter 3 continued. He put the Jeep in park and looked back into the back seat. I need you guys to stay in the Jeep no matter what happens. I need you to lock the doors behind me and your grandma, and don't open them until we get back, okay? They whimpered but agreed. Grace, I need you to cover me. When I get those things' attention and lure them to join me across the road, I need you to open fire on them. I'm going to try to get most of them with my hammer, so we don't waste ammo. So only shoot if you see me get into a bind. Got it, she answered as they both got out of the Jeep. Catherine hopped into the front seat, and Grace heard the automatic locks engage behind her. Hey, Len shouted, waving his arms. Hey, come on, soup's on. Got a crazy Swede here that would taste lovely with a side of sauerkraut. The infected turned in unison to face him and Grace. He walked out to the middle of the road, motioning for them to come with his hammer. That's it. Come and get it. He dispatched the first few with a solid blow to their skulls. One he had to push away from him. Grace finished it with a 12-gauge shot, exploding its head into a smear. When the crowd of infected were lying, twitching all over the highway, Len sprinted to the minivan, motioning for the family to roll down their windows. "Oh, God, thank you so much," the man said in a relieved tone. Do you want to follow us to the National Guard Armory?" Len asked. "We can't. My van's out of gas." "How many of you are there? We could probably take you all in my Jeep." "There's 5 of us. Me and my wife Kelly, our son, and my mother and father-in-law." Len looked back at his Jeep. "Well, it'll be a tight squeeze, but I think we can manage." As they all got out of the van, Grace walked over to Len. "Look at Kelly's arm," Grace whispered. There was a bandage around her upper arm. She looked sick. Sweat soaked through her shirt, and her eyes were yellowed. Her husband noticed Len and Grace looking at her. "Oh, don't worry. She only cut it in a broken window we had to escape out of," he said with a worried look on his face. Len and Grace looked at each other and then followed the family across the road to the Jeep. They had a few bags of groceries that they brought with them. Len put them in the back of his Jeep and had all 3 kids climb in the back with them. The mom and dad got into the back seats with Kelly. Grace, Len, and Tom took the front. "Tom Garbers," he held out his hand to Grace. She shook it and smiled. "Grace Spellman. This is my son-in-law, Len Emerson." Len and Tom shook hands, and Tom introduced his family. "Well, you know my wife, Kelly. This is my mother and father-in-law, Clara and Harvey Mitchell. My son's name is Greg." "Are you from Fair Lakes?" Len asked. "Clara and Harvey are. Kelly is originally from here, but we live in Minneapolis. We came down for Thanksgiving." "Buzz, buzz, Chuck." "Damn," Grace spoke up. "Nothing to be thankful for this year." "Those are my daughters in the back," Len continued. "Oldest one is Lee and the youngest is Catherine." "And, your wife?" Tom asked cautiously. Len paused and then said, "She's a nurse up at the hospital. She was working when all this shit hit the fan. So They evacuated the hospital over an hour ago. I'm hoping that she made it out and is at the armory." "Well, I'm sorry. I'll pray for that she did." Len was an agnostic. He hated it when people said things like that. "I don't know who you're going to pray to. I think all the gods are sleeping this one out." Kelly began to groan from the back seat. "She okay back there?" Len looked nervously into the rearview mirror. Clara checked her daughter's forehead. "She's burning up with fever." "Must have gotten an infection from her cuts." Tom looked over at Len. Kelly coughed up black liquid onto her own lap, and Len pulled the Jeep over. "Tom," Len said levelly, "get your wife out of the car." "Please. Aw, geez. She didn't get bitten. Honestly, she just got an infection from her cuts. You know, we had to break a few windows to..." Len got out of the Jeep and opened Kelly's door. "Come on, Miss Garbers. Come on out." Everyone started to get out of the Jeep except Kelly. Tom got out and got between Len and his wife. "Calm down, Len. Jeez," he pleaded. "She'll be okay once we get to the shelter." "She's got the virus, Tom. I can't let her endanger my family." Len had the hammer gripped firmly in his hand. Both Greg and his daughters were screaming for their respective parents. "Dear God, what are you going to do with that hammer? Just take it easy, Len, please." "Mrs. Garbers, I need you to get out of the car now." Kelly only groaned, drooling black saliva from her lips. Honey?" Tom grabbed his wife's uninjured arm gently. Come on now. Come on. Let's show Mr. Emerson that you're not, one of those things. Daddy? Catherine was frightened, and reasonably so. She was trapped in the back of the Jeep, and the only way out was the back hatch, which only opened from the outside. Stay put, kids. I need you to scoot back towards the hatchback, Len ordered, not taking his eyes off Kelly. They shuffled back to the hatch. Greg climbed over the seat and shook his mom. Mama? Greg said to her. Mama, come on. Well, let's go outside. I'm hot in here. Just then, Kelly grabbed Greg and pulled him onto her lap. He was lying there in shock, staring up at her, while she lowered her head down and bit into his stomach. He screamed and curled into a ball around her head as blood spouted out of the wound. Jesus, no! Tom yelled. Greg! Kelly! No! Daddy! Greg screamed as his mother began ripping his large intestine from the gaping bloody hole in his stomach. Kelly! Tom tried to drag Greg away from Kelly's grasp. Lee and Catherine were banging on the back window, panicking and screaming to be let out of the Jeep. Kelly leapt at Tom, and her jaw latched down onto his throat. His cries were cut short and continued in a gurgled, horrible plea. She pulled out a large chunk of meat and fed on it greedily. Grace lowered the shotgun at Kelly, and then Harvey grabbed that to barrel. Don't shoot my daughter, he begged. Len brought the hammer down right on top of Kelly's head. The end went in, caving in her skull. Her growls silenced, and then she dropped forward onto her dying son and husband. Daddy! The girl screamed. Stay there! He closed the Jeep door and then pulled Harvey away from his mother-in-law. You monster! Harvey cried into Claire's arms. You goddamn monster! Just get in the Jeep, he said quietly to them. I'm sorry. Please, just get into the Jeep. We're not going anywhere with you, Clara snapped. Then you're all gonna die, Grace said plainly. Harvey and Clara only stood there sobbing above what was left of their family. We have to go. Now, Len repeated to them. Grace nodded at Len to get in the Jeep. He went to touch Harvey on the shoulder, but Harvey only shrugged his shoulder away from him. Len backed away and got back into the Jeep. They had 7 miles to the National Guard Armory. All right, that's the end of Chapter 3, and now, Chapter 4. Let's get a drink of coffee here. Oh, that's some tasty stuff. All right. Hal tore off another sheet from the newswire. Apparently, the safe zone of the hospital had fallen. There was an internal breakdown due to the power failure. Another report from the CDC in Atlanta stating that the center had been overrun and further testing for a vaccine would be moved to a different location. There were no reports from Washington, D.C. The last report was this morning, stating that the vice president never made it out of the White House, and that the president was flying around somewhere in the air on Air Force One. Worldwide reports stopped coming in 3 hours ago. International communication was dead. He checked the outside cameras that looked out into the parking lot and on the main streets of Fair Lakes and her surrounding towns. Just fuzzy, pixelated movies of occasional deadheads roaming around burning buildings and abandoned cars. The KFMT studio sat in the middle of a sheep pasture on a hill overlooking the city of Fair Lakes. He was in the basement studio, normally used for tornado severe storm coverage. He used to joke to himself that if there was ever anything life-threatening, he would have just left the station and gone home to be with his family. But when everything went down, it happened so fast. Only he and the traffic manager were able to get downstairs on time. The rest were killed almost immediately. Ginger Graves had already been in the basement studio when he made it down. She had a large hunk taken out of her shoulder. He wrapped it with bandages he had found in the first aid kit. But a fever took her, and after the CDC released a wire stating that it was usually a good sign a person was infected with what they were calling the RAC-V, or reanimated corpse virus. After they had been exposed, he had dragged her into a storage room and locked her in. She was quiet most of the time. There was an occasional banging on the door, growls, moans, and scratching to get out. But he had locked himself in the emergency studio, which was soundproof. He stared blankly at the control board. He didn't know how long the generator would hold out, but it had been running on for over 9 hours now. He had been piping through live feeds from CNN, but their reports and signal were sporadic, and he knew it wouldn't be long until the airwaves went completely dead. He looked up at the monitors and he saw that the parking lot had 2 cars pull in. A group of about 7 people came from the 2 vehicles. Panic rose in his throat. Were they here to loot? For help? What help could he offer? There was a very small cache of supplies. Maybe they came here to take, to kill or be killed. He had no weapons down here in this damp, musty basement. Or honey badgers, as Chuck would say. He watched them walk through the broken glass door and disappear into the darkness of the front lobby. He didn't know if there were deadheads in there or not. He only knew of one, and that was Ginger, who was in the supply closet. Walking over to the studio door, he unlocked it and cracked it open just enough so he could hear their movement. He could hear them conversing at a harsh whisper. Then suddenly he heard gunfire erupt. There were moans and screaming intermixed with cursing. Then he heard the basement door open, and he slammed his studio door closed and locked it. He ducked down and cut the lights for the control board. The soundproof glass muffled most of what had happened. He saw bright flashes of gunfire, some thudding on the glass, and some crying. Someone tried the studio door and he almost wet himself. A few raps on the door and then nothing. When the muffled noises became less frequent, he slowly raised himself from underneath the control board. It was hard to make out what he was seeing in the darkness, and the windows smeared with blood and gore. But it looked as if there was an exchange of gunfire. It was hard to discern the deadheads from the uninfected dead. Just then, something came shambling towards the sound booth. He backed away from the window, and then someone wounded slammed themselves against the studio door. He pressed himself against the other side of the door, listening to the stranger plead to unlock the latch. I can't, Hal whimpered. I'm so sorry. I just can't. There was growling, just barely audible on the other side of the door. Then screaming, and then tearing of flesh. He turned his head at the movement he saw from the front window. It was another survivor running towards the supply closet. No! He screamed in vain. Don't open that! The female survivor opened the door, and Ginger fell upon her. Her screams were gurgling as human teeth ripped into her throat. Oh, Jesus. He couldn't stop himself from watching his co-worker tear into the stranger like a ravenous beast. The Ginger thing kept feasting when the other deadhead came around the corner and looked into the glass at Hal. He watched its rotting jaw snap open and close several times. Then it began pounding on the glass to get at him. After leaving her meal a mangled mess, Ginger stood up and joined her undead peer at the glass, both of them staring hungrily at Hal as their bony fist clicked and clacked on the soundproof glass. And that is the end of Chapter 4. And we'll be jumping into Chapter 5 next week. And, Chapter 5 is a bit of a sad chapter. We're going to be losing one of our main characters. And, And I actually got a lot of crap for killing that character off, but it is what it is, and that's what happens when you mess with me. I just kill you off in a book. That's what authors do. So, anyhow, guys, thank you very much for joining me. We'll be hitting Apocalypse Humpday again next week on Wednesday, same time, 9 o'clock. 9 p.m. Central Standard Time here in the United States. I do have family in New Zealand that always think that they're late because they go by their time, and they're 17 hours ahead of us. So, also, if you do miss the live broadcast, is it a bummer? Yes, because it's fun to converse with you guys and read to you live. But you can also see it, see the video, the playback. You can see it here on the b.hive page. You can also head over to YouTube, to my YouTube channel, and check it out there. And I've got everything all neatly coordinated in on playlists, so you can follow everything in order. I am working on. I know when I talked to you guys on Saturday, a little buzzing at the Hive. There's a lot of things I got coming up that I want to do with this page. One, I am going to try to start a donation thing to bring to send my books to prisons around the United States and put them into their libraries. Another thing that I'm thinking about doing, and I'm working with a guy, Mike Burns, that I play with. I'm working with him. I want to stop and visit or do a duet with some of you guys. I got to figure out how I can get together with Mitch and do a few songs with him live on Tunes for Tuesday. I just think something like that would be fun. So Mike and I have already kind of picked out some songs. We're going to get together and jam tomorrow and see how it sounds. And it might be something we do here on Tunes for Tuesday once in a while when I can do it. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Kyle Dirty Haugen, my little techie friend that he came up with that wonderful logo that I've got on there. Well, he came up with a cleaned up version of it. He was unhappy with the mic. I did have some people say, is that a corn on the cob, or is that supposed to be the b.hive? And it's supposed to be the b.hive. And evidently it was bugging him pretty bad. So he cleaned it up and changed it a little bit. And he made up a new one for me. And so I will be putting that on here when I get the chance. And I'll get that old logo replaced. So thank you, Kyle, for that. And we got the gig coming up in town here, the open mic jam, and all kinds of exciting stuff coming. I'm excited. I really am. I know it doesn't seem like it, but that's because the coffee isn't really helping wake me up. But yeah, we got this, folks. I got this, and thanks again for y'all coming out here, for you watching, listening, following, sharing, caring, and all that. So, if something comes up, I'm going to pop up on here and chat you guys up. So, in the meantime, I want you all to have a great night. If I don't talk to you beforehand, have an awesome weekend, and we will chat soon. Peace. Don't forget to join me on the next Apocalypse Humpday. also show up on Tuesday too for Tunes for Tuesday. All right. Thanks, guys. Peace out.